My name is Marc-Andre Pigeon. I am the director of the Canadian Centre for Study Cooperatives. And before we get going today, we thought it would be kind of fun if we and informative for us and for the panelists if we did a little quick poll. We're going to give you about 45 seconds to answer a poll question about to kind of gauge your understanding of cooperatives or renewable energy cooperatives. And then we're going to, at the end of the conversation, we're going to kind of see if we've been able to move the dial in terms of understanding the cooperative model. So if I can get Stan to throw up our poll, this will be a very easy and quick poll. And once we get that done, we'll report the results and we'll carry on. So Stan, can you put that up, please? And Stan, just let me know when the 45 seconds are up, and we'll post the results. Okay, and I see we have our other panelists. Perfect. So we're all accounted for. Yay.
10 seconds left to vote.
Perfect.
5 seconds. And polling has ended.
Thank you, Stan. And share the results. Okay, good. So we have an interesting, almost a kind of normal distribution here. Not right down the middle here. Good number of us are in the little category. So this is great. So the way we're going to do things today is I'm going to first begin by introducing my co-conspirator today, and that is Martin Boucher. Martin is a faculty lecturer at the Johnson Choyama. I think he just waved to you if you have him up on your screen somewhere. And frankly, this idea was Martin's. So if this goes horribly wrong, I want you to blame Martin. If it goes really well, I'd like you to direct your praise my way because I recognize the brilliance of the idea. So it's tails I win and heads I win. So that's the way it rolls here. Now, after some deliberation, Martin and I decided to split up the tasks today. So what I'm going to do is just kind of do a little introduction of the concept of a cooperative. And Martin's going to talk a bit about renewable energy, then he'll introduce our panel. So here's the thing about cooperatives. And Stan, I'm going to ask you to put the slide deck, please. Just waiting for the slide deck. So here's the thing about cooperatives. As soon as Stan gets the deck up, I'm going to launch in. There we go. Perfect. Here's the thing about cooperatives. They're kind of hard to see. They're a little incognito. They're not immediately visible. So for example, you know, I'm asking rhetorically here, is this a cooperative? Well, it turns out it is. This is an affinity credit union branch. But if you look at the branch, it looks, you know, maybe apart from the atrium kind of stylings here, it looks like a lot of bank branches. There's nothing really distinctive about the physical layout. You wouldn't walk in here and instinctively know this is a cooperative. And if you're banking with a credit union, you do the same things you do at a bank, right? You get loans, you deposit your savings, maybe you manage your wealth management, your retirement planning with the credit union. The functions look a lot alike. If you go to the next slide, please. And the same is true if you've pumped gas at a co-op gas station in Saskatoon or even Regina or anywhere in Western Canada. The confectionery or the little stores that are attached to the groceries to the gas station look very much like the confectionaries you'd see at Petro-Canada. Apart from the branding, and with the credit union, you might have seen Affinity's logo, or with co-op, you'll see the shield and the co-op logo. But if you didn't look at those things, if you just looked at the way the store is set up, it all looks pretty much the same. And if you go to the next slide, please. And I mean, that's true to, right down to the energy cooperative. The solar panel is a solar panel. It could be owned by a multinational. It could be owned by the cooperative. There's nothing immediately obvious about these services that screams cooperative. So the thing to kind of really kind of note is the difference doesn't reside at a kind of visible level for the most part. It actually sits kind of a little bit behind the scenes around the governance of these organizations, how they're organized. And so what's distinctive about cooperatives is this kind of confluence of relationships between the persons who use and benefit from the organization and the organization itself. We can go to the next slide, Stan. So this is the key thing in a cooperative, for today's purposes anyway. In a cooperatives, the members use, own, control, and benefit from the organization. So this is really important and fundamental to having this conversation today. So let's think about ownership, right? What does the ownership mean? It means that the people who own the business, the cooperative, get to elect the board of directors, for example. In a bigger organization, a bigger co-op, that'll be the extent of the relationship, usually from that kind of narrow ownership perspective. In a smaller cooperative, the members will be on the board, yes, but they may also have a lot of active roles as volunteers. They may help with, setting up a solar panel, for example. The board members themselves will have roles that stretch beyond the kind of conventional role of a board, so they may be the manager of HR. They may be responsible for communications. They may be responsible for technical aspects of the co-op, even though they are board members. They actually have roles, operational roles in smaller co-ops. In bigger co-ops, less true. So that's the ownership part. By virtue of that ownership part, the members also benefit from the organization, or they use the organization, and their benefit flows from that use. So they can get lower prices, perhaps, or they get better quality service, or they just get the psychic benefit of knowing they're in an organization that's democratically controlled and it's quite locally based. So there can be any one of those things or any combination of those things that kind of translate into the benefit side of things. And then the control piece we've already talked about, but just keep in mind how different this is, these four relationships between the individual and the cooperative, from the other kinds of firms that we're more familiar with, like say Loblaws as a grocery store. Loblaws is a privately run company, well, not privately, sorry. It's a publicly held company with many, many shareholders. But the shareholders in that organization can effectively exert control through their ownership claim. So a large shareholder at Loblaws, for example, can have a board seat or two board seats. A small shareholder does not, So in a cooperative, doesn't matter how much business you do with the cooperative, you still only have one vote. In a publicly traded company, your power relationship to that organization is a function of how many shares you own. So that's really different. And the other part of this too is a shareholder in Loblaws, especially if they're a big shareholder, probably doesn't shop at Loblaws. They probably shop at some downtown Toronto emporium that stocks overpriced food, right? Because they have a lot of money. Why would they shop at Loblaws? You can go to the next slide, please, Stan. I don't know how you advanced there. So there's a subtle difference here. In a cooperative, the members are typically users. They shop, they buy their gas, they do their banking, they buy their power, whatever. But they have this kind of user relationship and ownership relationship, control and benefit relationship. And the final thing I'll just tease out here, and then I'm going to pass it to Martin, is the notion of benefit. In an investor-owned firm, the investor's benefit is really that return, the dividends or the share price appreciation. In a cooperative, the members' return, the benefit is, like I said earlier, service quality is important. There could be a price element, there could be a return element, and there could be a psychic element of just kind of feeling like you're doing the right thing. So there's a really important differences that flow from these relationships that distinguish cooperatives from non-cooperatives. So there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot more we could say. Often these conversations talk about cooperatives from the perspective of the cooperative principles and cooperative values and cooperative ethics, and those are all really important things. I'm not going to talk about them today because we don't have a lot of time. Stan's going to put up a link in the chat function that links to the International Cooperative Alliance Statement of Cooperative Principles, Values, and Ethics, and I'd encourage people to go and look at those to get a richer sense of what a cooperative is. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Martin, who's going to talk about renewable energy a little bit, and then over to our panel. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Marc-Andre. An emphasis on a little bit, because you came here not to listen to me, but you came here to listen to our panelists. I'm really excited about today's panel. And one of the things I should say about it, it wasn't really my idea. It was actually the idea of folks from different perspectives that it sort of organically came up. So Haley Carlson from the Saskatchewan Environmental Society and the Solar Cooperative, she really kind of, I think, planted the seed, as well as folks from the Energy Management Task Force. In the energy community, were kind of asking for some sort of event like this. So I think that's really important too. to emphasize that this really kind of came up from the ground up. It was sort of organic, and I think we're seeing the benefits of that, where we have a lot of people coming here today, 81 folks, and with that question that we posed at the start, there's actually a good chunk of people that either didn't know anything about renewable energy co-ops or knew a little bit. And I think that's really important, so as to not always kind of preach to the choir, if you will. So I'm going to talk a little bit about renewable energy and co-ops, and then I'm going to turn it quite quick to our panelists, because I think that's what we want to we want to hear from today. So Marc-Andre talked about the cooperative model, but I'm interested in energy policy. I'm interested in reducing emissions, if you think about sort of climate change, energy is the big thing that you have to do to reduce emissions. Not to sort of state the obvious, but about 2/3 of GHG emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, come from the energy sector. If we want to move forward with climate change, we have to reduce energy-related emissions. So one of the criticisms, just to put it out there, of renewable energy co-ops is to sort of ask the question: are they the most effective means to reduce emissions? We have to. There are other options that we can pursue, and I think that's true from a public policy perspective. I think there are all kinds of tools that we can consider outside of co-ops that can reduce emissions and that can meet our targets. So then the question I'm really interested in, and that I really hope we can dig into, and I have my own personal answers, are why do renewable energy cooperatives matter in reducing emissions, given that we do have options? And what problems do renewable energy cooperatives solve that can't be solved by other means? And one of the things that I've observed with co-ops that I love about renewable energy co-ops is they represent the best values that I think we want to see with the energy transition. And Marc-Andre talked a little bit about that, but things like collaboration, so horizontal decision making, humility, not having one person make all of the decisions, self-responsibility. So renewable energy co-ops, folks that are members and board members are part owners. They have skin in the game, and courage. A lot of renewable energy co-ops have tremendous courage. They're innovative. They take risks and approach things from a new perspective. And I think that's really the value that I see with renewable energy co-ops, is new ideas and innovation. And you see this in spades with renewable energy co-ops, things like virtual net metering, integration with car sharing, new ways of financing, increasing our sort of ethical standards with how we source material for our projects, and even unique partnerships with governments and nonprofit sectors. So I think that's in a larger way where I see renewable energy cooperatives adding value, is they sort of chart a new pathway forward. They open our minds to new ideas, and I think that the way a co-op is formed fosters that tremendous, creates the sort of magic sauce of innovation. And I think as we move towards reducing emissions, we're seeing significant government spending in that regard, or post-COVID recovery. I think we can look to our renewable energy co-ops for ideas about how decisions could be made, who they can serve, and just sort of pathways forward with our energy system. So that is enough about me ranting and raving about renewable energy cooperatives. Again, you came here to hear about our wonderful renewable energy cooperatives. So I am glad to turn the mic, so to speak, to our co-ops. We have 4 co-ops here today, and we're going to start the panel off with a elevator pitch kind of frame. So they're going to give you a Coles Notes version of what they do and all the wonderful things that they're doing. And then, so we're going to have 5 minutes for each co-op, and then we're going to turn and ask them some tough questions and have a really good conversation around renewable energy co-ops. So we have co-ops from across Canada. We have the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative. We have here in Saskatoon, the SES Solar Cooperative, the Wascana Solar Cooperative in Regina, and we have the Solar Power Investment Cooperative of Edmonton, with the acronym that makes all the other co-ops jealous, SPICE. So to start things off, let's go with the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative. Can you, Stan, can you please put up the PowerPoint slides on their behalf? And I would ask representatives, because in some cases we have more than one representative, to introduce their cooperative as well as themselves to the group.
Okay, am I live?
You are.
Okay, good, thank you. This is Dick Bacher speaking. I'm going to represent both OREC, the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative, and Co-Energy Cooperative. I'll do two co-ops in less than 5 minutes, I hope. Why two organizations? It's because of the provincial regulations that we have to operate operate under within Ontario, the regulations that control electricity and cooperatives. OREC was founded in 2010, just after the former Liberal government introduced the Green Energy Act, and they created a special kind of cooperative called a Renewable Energy Cooperative, quotes, which was different than other co-ops. We founded OREC under that, and we've carried on. So next slide, please. OREC was founded, as I said, to operate under the Green Energy Act regulations. And at the time, there was something called a feed-in tariff in Ontario, and OREC is allowed to do one thing, we realized after the fact, and that is generate renewable energy power and sell it to the grid or to a building. We can't do anything else. So from 2010 until last year, we had a fairly successful run. We built 21 projects, 18 of them are feed-in tariff contracts with fixed prices, and 3 of them are net metering contracts where we're selling the power to the building, which was quite revolutionary in this province. At the time in 18, the government changed, a new government came in, they threw out all feed-in tariff regulations, and the world of energy was changing. At the time, they thought there's no need for new power right now because there is a surplus at this point in Ontario. So we had to create a new cooperative called Co-Energy, and its role is to produce power or save power and allow members to invest in those projects, hopefully earn a good return on that, because the energy market in Ontario was not consuming power, it was going to move towards more of a conservation environment, and OREC was not allowed to do that. So now, this year, or as of 2021, we have over 1,000 members between the two cooperatives, about 780 in OREC and about 340 in Co-Energy. The Co-Energy entity is only a couple of years old. So there's a fair number of members on both sides. I was involved in both of them from the start. Next slide. Both of these entities are designed to provide our members with the ability to invest their patient capital in projects within their community and allow for ownership by normal average citizens in an area with a portion of their pension. Basically, we're kind of set up as mini pension funds. We pay back the capital over a period and we pay a dividend each year. OREC has paid a dividend every single year since we started operating. Co-Energy has not yet, as we're in a different market and is a little more, we're in a startup mode and the market is different. The customers are smaller entities and we're not dealing with a power purchase agreement from the province at this point. In all cases, we see our role as to use the co-op model to fight, or not fight, to prevent NIMBYism from stopping and stalling good industrial development in our communities. We want local money to generate power or save power in the local community, keeping the jobs and the electrons within that community. And ownership is the best way of educating. If you own something, it looks different, it feels different, and you're concerned when the turbine isn't turning if it's paying part of your mortgage. If it's owned by a bank from far away, it looks different, it feels different, it's not relating to you, it's an annoyance. Next slide, please. OREC has, as I said, 21 projects. What you see here is a picture of the Mer Bleu High School in the east end of Ottawa, in Orleans. That project is a partnership between OREC and the school board. All of the power in that building is being consumed by the school. We're generating about 60% of the power that the school needs during the peak demand time of the summer, when they're 60% of their year-round production or consumption needs. As I said, we're also involved in energy conservation initiatives. The picture in the bottom right-hand corner is the RA Center in Ottawa, where we finance all of the lighting, outdoor lighting, and put in new energy efficient systems. And as a co-op, we're democratically managed by, or controlled by our members. Each member has a vote, and what you're seeing there is a picture of one of our AGMs. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, the classic Zoom mistake of me muted. You think I would have learned by now. Thank you very much, Dick. Appreciate that. Let's move on with our next co-op, which is the SES Solar Co-op.
All right. Am I audibly present? I am. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to immediately jump all over you guys. Number one, Marc-Andre. What was missing in your definition of a co-op? People. Dick brought it out. There was one image that had people. You know, a cooperative is an organization, community, like-minded members. That's the co-op. Done deal. Martin, I'll just say, you know, listen to what Martin had to say. Ditto. You don't have to listen to me anymore. We're done. Renewable Energy 101. You can come to my class any other time other than today. And realize that this is the last century we're actually going to be using fossil fuels. Fossils were done 66 million years ago. What are we doing? Still using them? I think some of our administrative people, you know, I won't point fingers at provincial or federal, but yes, those are the people that are still in the Pleistocene. They're frozen, you know, 12,000 years ago. The ice is gone, folks. Hello. So the solar co-op is a community, like-minded group of people, members. And I would say, thanks, Dick, for that image of people in there. One thing that I would mention that makes us different is that we provide service to a cause, which normal publicly financial markets do not. And that's what a cooperative does. It provides, you know, this fill in, if you will, of what's being missed there out in the normal business world. So we're quite different in that regard. We're, you know, community development, yes. We're certainly economically minded. It's all for our members, and to, of course, have local economic resilience. That's what it's all about. So Solar Co-op was established or incorporated 6 years ago. That's why we look so young and agile. We're only 6 years old. And in fact, our birth date was just about 10 days ago now, I guess. We came together and were incorporated on the 13th of February in 2015. Oh, guess what? It was a Friday, the 13th. It didn't slow us down, even though the forecast was for 15 to 20 centimeters of snow that day. Did I mention we're a solar cooperative? Not to be dissuaded. So a group of half a dozen or more like-minded people, which has grown enormously since then, came together and started our organization. We were incorporated under the Cooperatives Act of 1996 in the province of Saskatchewan. We uncomfortably sit as a consumer cooperative. Yes, you could see us as that, but we're also I guess, a a producer or a production cooperative as well. So we sit in a category that wasn't really made for cooperatives, but there you are. We're very proud about being the first in Saskatchewan as a renewable energy cooperative, as Martin has already mentioned what that is. We followed, of course, the democratic business model. That's co-ops are owned and operated by local residents in a very democratic fashion, so we're happy about that. And the main focus was to reduce greenhouse gases, reduce the emissions. Solar panels produce electricity, yes, we know that, but they produce electricity that are 10 times less in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and 17 times less than the usual fossils that you might have out there, the coal-fired production, which is about 47% of Saskatchewan's power still. We're going to change that. And you too, I'm going to be totally unabashed. I'm here to put forward the fact that we're just about ready to sell out of a share offering. And you too can, from Saskatchewan, of course. I mean, are there any other provinces?
Well, still got sound from me? Yeah. Much to your chagrin, you're still hearing me?
So your mic went a little, just as you were trying to sell shares, your mic, your mic got really loud. I don't know if that was
okay.
or not, Rod.
I think it just came back. Is it okay now?
Good. Yeah.
Okay, there's some shares left. Quickly, get that out there. Just a few. We're going to close out shares on March 15th. Reducing greenhouse gases, that's what this cooperative is all about in terms of generating electricity through solar panels. And of course, there's the whole research to minimize the input, sweatshops and ROHS, that's restricted hazardous substances in our panels. We're raising the bar for all our installers to follow those directives that are European so far. And of course, public education, that's what we're all about.
You good, Rod? You cut out again. Yeah, your mic. We'll have to go on to the next the next group there, Rod, but we'll give you a chance. I swear this wasn't on purpose. It wasn't because of all the mean things you said about me not having any hair. Okay. So thanks a lot, Rod. And you heard it from him. There's a share offering there with the SES Solar Co-op. So let's turn to our friends in Regina, Wascana Solar Co-op. So we have, I believe Larissa's going to share what they've been up to. And one thing I would like to emphasize to the group, feel free to use the comments section, the chat, to comment on the presentations or have any questions for the panelists that we'll try to get to later. So, continue that. Yeah, please feel free to use that. So Wascana Solar Cooperative.
Well, hello, everyone. My name is Larissa Shasko. I am here representing the Wascana Solar Cooperative. I'm a very recent addition to the board of WSC. So I also have here today with me Will Ginthrin, who can answer some of your questions and is going to help me present a couple of these slides. So myself, I'm also actually a PhD student at Johnson Triana Graduate School of Public Policy, and I research climate change, energy policy, and youth engagement. So it's a small world. 1 degree of separation in Saskatchewan, as we like to say. So Wascana Solar Co-op, you can move actually to the next slide, please. So we began with 2 grassroots community meetings in Regina, one in early 2017 at the Cathedral Community Center, and the other later that same year in the former Artful Dodger. And it was at these meetings that our 2 foundational programs were born, the Solar Investment Opportunity and Group Buy programs. With our SIO program, co-op members purchase preferred shares at $1,000 each. Then we reach out to potential partners who offer us space to install our systems. And we help these partners go green while they pay us the cost of their power usage. This program is a benefit to all those who are interested in solar energy investments, but especially those who don't have the space or capital available to install their own panels. For our first solar investment opportunity, we partnered with Connexus Credit Union and My Energy and installed 115 solar panels on the roof of the North Albert Connexus branch. We're also currently exploring our second SIO installation in Regina and expect to be offering an investment opportunity very soon. You can now move to the next slide, which Will is going to present.
Yeah, just a brief synopsis. This is the production at the Connexus Credit Union, just in Regina here. Yeah, so it produced, this is 2020 as in its entirety. It produced 53 megawatt hours in total, which is about, it totaled about $7,250 in savings for the Connexus. And I should point out that Connexus is, well, they're a credit union. My understanding is they're a co-op as well, or how does that work? Clarissa, are you aware? But I'll just finish this off. So the equivalent of that in Saskatchewan in CO2 equivalent avoided is 33,840 kilograms. And that's assuming a greenhouse gas intensity of 637 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour produced. That number is from 2019.
Perfect, then you can move on to the next slide now. And that would be an excellent question to ask either Marc-Andre or maybe Martin would know as well. I'm not entirely sure I can explain that. So,
unfortunately,
so
Josh is not here, our faithful leader.
Yes.
He has the most experience in the co-op. So.
Absolutely. So I'll move on now to talk about our group buy program. So in this program, we organize a group of our members who are interested in purchasing panels, and we gather the technical requirements for solar projects and then tender it out in a request for proposal. The 13 members who participated in our first group buy collectively saved $67,000 off the market rate on panel purchases and installation, which is an average savings of $5,000 each. And in only 28 months of incorporated existence as a cooperative, we've installed 468 panels in southern Saskatchewan through our solar investment opportunity and group buy programs. This is an estimated reduction of 150 tons of CO2 per year. The co-op model is robust and continues to strengthen us going forward. Still, there are many policy considerations that require attention, and Will is now going to speak to some of these on the next slide. So you can move to that.
Yeah, just to wrap up that group buy piece, I'm not sure of how many co-ops that are out there are doing some sort of similar program where we run an RFP after we get kind of secured projects in place. We're doing kind of an initial design as well, which is kind of neat, and engaging with the homeowners usually, and ensuring that we're working on behalf of them, for them, using our experience in solar installations to leverage that and make it easier for the installer as well, and really hone in and on that pricing. And it makes it a heck of a lot easier for homeowners or building owners to walk them into a project that way, where they have someone on their side with experience working for them. It's a big purchase and a little bit scary. So policy considerations, some stuff that we are thinking would help the industry out severely is just some stability and clarity on the future of solar in Saskatchewan. Just touching on that, capital investment flows to certainty. Saskatchewan has about 60 megawatts of solar under development. One of those is under construction. I think it's nearing completion just outside of Current. It's a 10 megawatt facility. Some of those have not. I think the last one hasn't been awarded yet. There's going to be 2 10 megawatt facilities just to the east of Regina, right on the edge of it. But in comparison, Alberta has about 5,500 megawatts of solar under development. the difference between the two regions, I guess, is there's the one glaring thing that is that we have a Crown Corp here in Saskatchewan, and they choose how much power they want to come on. Alberta is an open power market. So it's up to the facility owner and operator. They're the ones who are at risk. They put forward the capital and they choose to participate in the market itself, where the power price fluctuates and is open to market. So another policy consideration for Saskatchewan, or even just in general, is allow community-owned power generation projects in Saskatchewan. There's talk of community projects on the horizon. Nothing has really manifested yet, but it would be great to do that, and even potentially virtual net metering type projects. Another consideration could be a generation choice to allow consumers the ability to choose the generation type, and this could provide a market-driven mechanism here in Saskatchewan. There's so many folks that, whether they live in apartments like myself or live in certain scenarios where solar isn't right for them, but they still want to participate, and we feel as a co-op we can help facilitate that, so long as we get the policy in place to do it. Then there's the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, the PACE program, that is apparent in Alberta, where you basically pull the capital out, and it's based on your property, and you pay it back through your taxes, and it's usually administered by your municipality. It's a very handy and unleashes a lot of capital, and welcomes a lot of people to investing into their property itself, and the investment stays with the property moving forward. And then in Saskatchewan, last consideration to touch on today is reinstate net metering. And in order for this to, we think, in order for this to kind of be welcomed, or just kind of brainstorming, it would be fantastic if SaskPower could break out the price of power in the charges that they have to date, separating transmission, distribution, any other rate riders or tariffs. And this would reduce the risk for SaskPower, even though they'd still be losing some power generation due to self-generation. At least there wouldn't be a risk of the underlying assets and the maintenance of them if people were to do that. And I'll hand it back off to Larissa.
And you can just move on to the next slide, which is just thank you for your attention listening to our presentation today. And we look forward to answering your questions. There's myself and Will, and also our president of Wascana Solar Co-op, Josh Campbell, who is here today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Larissa and Will. That was fantastic. Really appreciate learning what you folks are doing in Regina. And just for those who don't know, net metering, which is the sort of policy tool that you mentioned, that is a very common policy tool that a lot of co-ops use. It's where you get, when you produce electricity from your solar or whatever generation source, you get a one-to-one credit on your bill. So a way of thinking about it is almost like using the utility as a battery. It's like you have a so when the solar is not producing electricity, you can draw from the grid and you get those sort of credits back from when you actually produced electricity. So let's go with our final co-op, which is the Solar Power Investment Cooperative of Edmonton. And it's a bit of a tongue twister, and that's probably why they went with the acronym SPICE. So the folks from SPICE, we have Warren joining us here from SPICE.
You're not going to try my last name?
Sauer?
It's close. You know, most of my relatives are from Saskatchewan, so you should know that. It's Sauer. You're close. Well, thanks everybody. It's good to see everybody engaged on this topic. Most of my slides are actually more on a policy-related issue, because I've thought that that's what the discussion points were. So I kind of figured most of the people ahead of me were going to cover most of the points that as to why we're a co-op and stuff like that. And then the big differentiator for us is the power grid, how the regulations provincially and how we can utilize those. To Wascana's previous slides about the underdeveloped solar in Alberta, I think what people need to keep in mind is those are not finished, they're not commissioned. They're just on the books as being potentially projects, okay? And so under the previous government, the NDP, they had a fairly strong mandate to do something about climate change. And so a lot of projects jumped in, got on the books. How many of those actually come to fruition remains to be seen, because the current government is not offering any support at all to it, okay? So why did we feel that we wanted to do this in Alberta? I think it's very, very similar to most everybody else. We saw climate change as an issue for us. Our society is fairly wealthy. We didn't see the government doing anything locally. We started in 2012 and we incorporated.
I think Warren just needs a second to get his
Oh,
dog.
he just loves Zoom meetings. Where was I? So anyways, yeah, so we saw a lack of action from levels of government. And since most of the founders were involved already with solar energy. And so we were looking around to see what the rest of the world was doing. Obviously, Ontario was moving on that direction. We were advocating for some things. It turned out that there was no chance of a FIT program ever coming to Alberta. And so we lost that nice touch. That's what both Germany and Ontario used. It's a very nice mechanism, especially from the investment side. But basically we felt, okay, what can we do? We have access to capital, people. They have no green investment choices currently in the province. We don't like the direction that the government's going. And so why don't we just take our own money and do something with it? So that was the concept behind it. As we incorporated, we were working with municipal governments, actually, who were heavily engaged in the topic as well. And then the NDP came to power. And so then we kind of shifted gears to working with the government on developing policy. And we were actually fairly influential in them developing two mechanisms. One was an income tax credit for co-ops. And the other one was developing their community generation program. And so if Stan would move to the last slide that I had, that would be helpful, I think. One more, that one. So the challenge we have in Alberta, though, is that we have some regulations that are actually in competition with each other. And this is different than most other jurisdictions. So in Alberta, Saskatchewan talked about net metering. In Alberta, that's not allowed here, that's illegal. But what we have is what's known as net billing. It's a subtle difference, but basically if you have net metering, if you generate 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, but then you buy 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity from the grid in a month, you basically would have a zero bill. That's the concept behind it. In Alberta, we have a deregulated system, so we have independent parties. The generators are independent from the distributors who bring the power to you, who are independent from the retailers. So every party must be paid in Alberta. And so this is what net billing is. So if you were to generate 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a month and send it to the grid, you would get paid for that at one rate. But at night, or if you bought 1,000 back, you would also have to pay for that. And so in effect, you would, even though you offset what you generated, you offset by generating what you consumed, you would still have a bill. So this is a bit of a financial barrier to doing this. This is what's done under the microgeneration regulation. It's been around since about 2008. Can only be generated with renewable energy. And it's very difficult to do if you have something like a condominium or an apartment building or something like this. It's much simpler for a single owner of a property, so a residential client or commercial operator. Okay, it's very difficult to do with multifamily or multiple commercial entities, just because of the ownership of the roof space, if you want to call it that. Okay, they have distributed generation, which is what every other province, most jurisdictions around the world have. So you have generation that you can put anywhere and tie into the grid. And this is kind of the model that Ontario has used and such. Typically what we've seen in the past is this is the big coal plants and everything. They do this out of sight, out of mind, and then they tie into the transmission systems. And so that can be very complex and very expensive. So when the NDP government was in place, they brought in what's known as the small scale generation regulation. There you tie into the local distribution network, which tends to be closer to your home. Can be as big as 25 megawatts, which is a big project. However, for utilities, that's considered small scale. So that's where the word comes from. They consider that to be tiny. Now, within that regulation, the NDP created an umbrella for what they called community generation. And so the province was going to buy the electricity generated by community groups, such as co-ops. It's very similar to what they did in Ontario. However, it was not going to be nearly as generous as the FIT programs. And so with the NDP leaving power, the regulation is in place, but there's no longer anyone to buy the electricity. So Dick had mentioned power purchase agreement. Just going to breeze past that real fast. We'll probably get talking about that into the policy Q&A. But that's the mechanism where somebody purchased the power from you on a long-term contract. And so this is the challenge that we have in Alberta right now. If we want to do community generation, we have to find somebody to buy the electricity for us, okay? To make these projects work, it has to be over a long term, typically 20 years. So that's a pretty major skin in the game for somebody. And it's going to be, up front, it'll be more than what they would pay for the market price of electricity. But the concept is that after 20 years, because there's no inflation to it, that it might be cheaper than what the market price of electricity is after 20 years. But you need somebody who has deep pockets and a rather strong leap of faith to go there, okay? So that's what we're working on. We've decided that we're not gonna do, we looked at bulk buy, which is what Wascana mentioned, group buy. The market here is quite competitive, so we didn't feel that we could actually offer much beyond what the local installers were offering. We also didn't want to get into a competitive process with installers. So we're looking at more of the financing and investment side of it. So an installer who wants to put in a system, but the party doesn't have the financing in place, we would be willing to finance that. We're also willing to look at storage. And we're looking also at energy efficiency upgrades, so reduction of consumption. We're looking at financing all those things. We're starting with solar generation because it's shiny, and shiny gets attention. And so we would start there and work our way through the rest of it as we go. We also have PACE happening in Alberta, but it's a slow rollout as well. So it's possible there's something within PACE that we could also work. Wascana mentioned that in their slide. This is tied to the property value of the property owner. And that's another tool in a toolkit, okay? In Alberta, just in general with co-ops, we don't actually have renewable energy co-ops per se within the regulation for co-ops. So we are actually what's known as an opportunity development co-op, which is an investment co-op. But there's a lot of flexibility in there. So long as our members are investors, we can operate like a renewable energy co-op. So I think that's probably covering it, Martin. I don't know where my time's at, but I can park the rest of it for when people have questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Warren. And yeah, I think we're going to go in our sort of group discussion a little bit right now. And I would just encourage everyone, if you have questions, we're going to give an opportunity for you to pose your wonderful questions to our wonderful group of panelists. But to get things going, I want to sort of pull back a little bit. So we heard about all these very specific examples around co-ops in these different parts of the country. And for those who don't know on the call, we have actually very different electricity systems all throughout this country, and that matters. But I don't want that to be the focus of our conversation, because we can kind of get in the weeds of FIT programs and net metering and things like that. And I'm interested in a more general conversation from the group around what they think are the policy and business environment just more generally that allow renewable energy co-ops to flourish. So less about the sort of electricity side and those technical pieces, and more so like what support or connections or things like that are needed to do this. And I'm going to call on actually Dick to speak a little bit about that, because I know, and then I'm going to call on the rest of the panelists as well, but I know you have been in this space quite a bit. What are your thoughts, just as a generality, that the policy and business environment that really makes co-ops, renewable energy co-ops, flourish? You're muted.
Sorry, I'm going to start off by not answering your question and doing what you said not to do. Because I'm coming from Ontario, I kind of have to say a few words about FIT, the feed-in tariff program, which is a copy of Germany, which was a copy of something in California. But it's the most misunderstood program in Canada, I think. And I have to challenge something Warren said about exorbitant rates or very rich rates in the feed-in tariff program. They weren't rich when they're introduced. There was a set rate based on the cost, and every new round of FIT contracts went down based on the new cost structure. So the first systems we installed were $70,000 each. Now we can install the same system for under $20,000. That's what's happened to the cost of solar, but that's also what happened to the pricing that they awarded the later contracts on. What the feed-in tariff gave the co-ops and the whole solar industry is what it needs the most, and that is predictability of revenue. It didn't give us exorbitant rates, it gave us predictability, so we could go to investors and say, we know that if we generate a watt, we will get paid. And that's the way all electricity is contracted in the country in all the different systems that we have. Organizations are paid a guaranteed rate. In Ontario, 7.9% guaranteed rate for their electricity they generate and for the distribution of that electricity forever. We only have a 20-year FIT contract. At the end of the 20 years, we'll get paid the marginal rate at that time for retail, which is going to be fully depreciated. So in 20 years or in 10 years from now, if our contract is for 10 years, or 20 years from the time the contract is over, the price of electricity under those FIT contracts will collapse. So Ontario's looking at a dropping cost of electricity from FIT contracts when the contracts are over. Anyway, what I think the renewable energy sector needs, and especially the co-op sector, is a way to give predictable pricing and predictable investments to their investors. And that's what the feed-in tariff offered us, and that's why it was introduced in Germany years ago. There's other ways of doing it, but the other thing that is causing the most problem is the predatory regulations of the various utility monopolies across the country. So there might be some policy announcement that looks good for us all, but when you look at how it's implemented, it's often negative for us all, because we're not that big utility that's looking at a 25 megawatt plus kind of project, as Warren pointed out. Those are massive, but from our perspective, they are massive. From our perspective, they're beyond what we can afford to get investment for from our members. We co-ops fit in that small to medium sized area. The biggest project OREC has done is a 500 kilowatt. We've done 2 of them, but in partnership with other people. We're hoping to do something quite large soon, but that would be in partnership again with the utility. But anyway, we need predictability in the revenue stream, and we need good regulations from our dearest friends, the utility monopolies, who generally don't want little annoying people like us around. Sorry about the long-winded description.
Thanks a lot, Dick, and I appreciate that. I'm wondering what Rod's take is on this. With I know the SES Solar Co-op, you've seen changes with net metering and things like that, and that you've seen some of the impacts again in a different way than our friends in Ontario. What are your thoughts on sort of predictability and what that kind of looks like? And Rod, I should have been clear. I want you to use hand gestures actually in your response, and we're all going to guess what you. So explain predictability and. Yeah, you're still not working there, Rod.
Still an issue with my mic. Okay.
Well, I might turn the same question while you sort out your mic to Larissa, a fellow JSGS policy researcher there.
Sure. So I think that from my perspective, and I think through some of my research I've been doing here as a scholar, supporting community-led energy policy decision-making is really important. And I think that really is key to, we need to have, I think, more dialogue between or among citizens, academic and industry experts, and Sask Power and decision makers at the provincial and municipal levels of government. That I think is key with net metering. There wasn't really a discussion with that happened. I think before that, all of a sudden that program was canceled. And I think too, it's then that so looking at that the policy and business atmosphere. It's one of the reasons I focus on youth engagement is because we're looking to the future and how that is going to be playing out there. But really, I think it starts too at that values level. We need to have a shift in values. I think in the political culture where there's a focus on really caring about climate change and taking it seriously. And I think that's really important too when we look at the agreements that we've signed, like the Paris Agreement, that has to inform our approaches here. So I think Will could probably also answer more to the specifics if he wants to weigh in.
Yeah, no, I think you hit it right on the head. I think just some sort of group effort or engagement between the utility and our co-op specifically. Maybe Josh can speak to this, but I don't know if there's ever been a single conversation between the two. We operate kind of within the regulation, and there's no further discussion. We would love to have the community projects where we can potentially build or unleash the public's capital. It's at no cost to the utility. They can select locations where they want the developments to be placed. It seems like an opportunity to kind of bind the community together with the utility, and it's helps them a heck of a lot.
This is great. I think I want to jump in here because I see, we're going to have one more general question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. But I'm hearing a lot of discussion about the policy environment, which is great, which we were wanting that, and how much it shapes the outcomes. Can you share, and I'll direct this question to Warren or Raquel first. How have you had conversation with policymakers? Like, how do you tell the story? Because clearly these policy changes have big impacts on the viability of the co-op. So what kind of stories do you find they're compelling and move them to think more creatively about the sector? What works and what doesn't work too? So I'll start with you, Raquel, and then if Rod's working, we'll go to Rod. And failing that, I'd like to talk to Dick as well, because I know he's thought a lot about this. So Raquel, we'll start with you, or Warren.
If I knew, I'd tell you. So I've learned that when I don't know, I shift the subject a bit. I mean, I think that, you know, I align with what other folk have said, that we're still perhaps focused on one of the cooperative principles, cooperation amongst cooperatives, and education, another cooperative principle, that we're perhaps still in that phase where we need to really highlight the true value of cooperatives. I don't think the true value of cooperatives is still well known. So I think we have a lot of power together. So gratitude for this group for putting this together, because I feel I'm truly with my people, though we've only met, because it really is, you know, by the people, for the people. And, you know, to answer Martin's first sort of, are we the most efficient way to put green electrons on the grid? I think not, but I think that is completely our beauty, that, you know, we are by the people, for the people, and we're about concern for community, democracy. So even though we're not able to scale up, perhaps because of our structure, we scale horizontally. You know, we engage as we go. And so my answer is, I think we're starting with building this beautiful group we've put together, and still working on highlighting our value, and then getting audience and working on those policies. So this is great work that's begun.
Thanks, Raquel. Rod, are you able to jump in without the hand?
Can I actually, Mark?
Yeah, I think you can hear me now. This is just using my internal mic. I'm sorry about the broadband width that I've got. Are you able to hear the sound at all? Okay, thanks. So two things. One, I'd like Martin just to mention virtual net metering for the folks that are really technically inclined. You talked about net metering a little bit. The SES Solar Cooperative has had some experience in virtual net metering. We really want to push that envelope. That's one of our efforts. The other thing that we do is that a member's shares are invested totally into an installation, and we partner up with like-minded partners, and we provide the cost of installation, and we guarantee the price of that preferred share that the member purchases over the 20-year period of our installation with whichever partner that we currently have. The other thing I'd like to do, if Stan's still with me and has my slide deck, I'd like to pull up at least one of my slides. I unfortunately didn't get that opportunity. And then I might turn it over to some of my other colleagues that are showing up here as well. So slide number 2, Stan, if that's possible.
I think we can do that, Rod, but if you could be really crisp, we have a lot of people want questions, and I'm just mindful of time. Also, I want to get Dick on this question that I asked around the communication, because I think this is the challenge. If I can just put it this very bluntly, a lot of this discussion that we're having now is very interesting for people who are in the space. But if you're outside the space, your head's spinning. I don't think you understand what virtual net metering is, or feed-in tariffs, or, you know, and remember, I think the challenge is talking to policymakers. How do we talk to them in a way they're going to get? So I think we have to kind of be mindful of the two levels of conversation for a general audience and technical audience. So if we can just keep that in mind, I think that would be a really good outcome for us to see if we can kind of get across the message in a general way.
Okay, so I just wanted to show this slide because this is what happened to the Texans, that were not mindful of the value of diversification of their energy supply and not having partnerships, or you might say cooperatives, involved. You notice the yellow spot there, totally out of the loop. And of course, that wasn't pleasant for those people. But then again, they are Texans. So the other comment then is that, for policymakers, we need to get across to them that cooperatives are providing a service which the general financial markets do not, and that is to address a cause. That is to provide a socially acceptable way of investing. And as Warren and Dick have already mentioned, we fit in that niche, if I might use that. My background's ecology, and therefore I'd like to see us mimicking nature in this regard. So the policy people need to be brought up to speed. And I know we're talking about lawyers and commerce grads and so forth. So there's a huge educational necessity there to get one to realize that we're serving the community on a community basis. We're protecting the consumers from the increasing cost of fossil fuels. And this is an alternative that has its day, and that has a number of guarantees in it, as well as providing that renewable energy. I tend to shy away from green energy anymore. I certainly tend to shy away from alternative energy. This is mainstream, right? We're talking mainstream. Let's get past that. I understand there are people who are just trying to grapple with this whole concept, but we're past the agenda stage. We're certainly elaborating on what cooperatives are all about. We need to implement. That's where I think we're at. So purchasing shares allows a bit of security, certainly in our group. And then we have RRSP eligible shares. That's part of our program. And we have that guarantee for that preferred share. Again, it's just one member, one vote, yes, but you can buy 100 shares if you want, and you then have some prospect of getting a return on this electrical generation that we're doing through solar in our case, and that is into the foreseeable future, because our partnership agreements are 20 or 25 years long, right? And we have a 400 kilowatt install, just went up and became operational in September with Case New Holland Industrial here in Saskatoon. So, we have partners that are of the category, you might say, corporate, and certainly still community minded. There's lots of organizations that want to do the green, right? And not greenwash. They want to show that they are proving that they are cooperatives. And I mentioned, or Will, I think was mentioned, is Connexus Corporation? Yes, I believe they are. I think most of the credit unions in Saskatchewan are corporations. So we could look at them that way too. So I'll stop. Marc-Andre?
Yeah, great. Oh, great. Thanks, Rod. That was great and so much clearer. I'm really grateful for the sound quality and the content. Dick, you want to pick up a little bit on what Rod was saying? Because I know you've thought a lot about this, especially communicating to an audience that may not be immediately sympathetic, let's put it that way, to the co-op model, renewable energy, small producers, et cetera, that are inherently skeptical. So what's your story there? And then we're going to open it up after Dick has jumped in. So go ahead.
Yeah. So thanks, Marc-Andre. Yeah, as you all know, I'm in Ottawa. So what's Ottawa? Politics, federal government, and we've been trapped trying to represent the co-ops across the country to this and other governments in this city, federal, provincial, and municipal. Energy is political. The price of electricity is at the highest price a politician can allow it to be and get reelected. That's the only thing that determines the pricing of electricity. And they'll push that off into our kids' future if they can, as we do in Ontario. So if it's political, the thing that co-ops have is an ability to get voters in a community involved in this. We can bring political not political capital, but we can bring capital from the community to bear on this climate change issue. If it's a real issue, then they need money from every source to be addressed here. And the most important thing today, I think, is that Rod sells out his SES shares. So anybody from Saskatchewan or has any family or connections in Saskatchewan should be getting shares. Because every time we talk to the politicians, we do mention to them that we've now got 100 more members than we did last time we saw them, or whatever it is, and that we have invested that money in projects in communities where people are vote and are active. And we have the ability as co-ops to self-select our membership, as we will, of people who are interested in this topic. And most people are not interested in this topic. Surprise to everybody here. I know we all are, but most people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis don't give much thought to energy, climate change, or the financing thereof. And what we really bring to the table are two things. money, because everybody needs money, and we're in a post-COVID environment where the budgets are all down, and we bring the ability to really fight NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. If you're a co-op owner of a renewable energy asset in your community, you want that asset to be producing. It's yes, please in my backyard, not the old NIMBY fight of everybody's a NIMBY. Even if you're an environmentalist, you don't want that wind turbine in your front window. But if it's paying your mortgage, maybe you're not going to be so objective to it. So those are the pitches that we use to the politicians. They love it, but they don't do much because the silo, we're cross silo. The governments are silo oriented. This department does that. That department does something else. But we have to touch environment, energy, finance, treasury board, and the different departments. So it's extremely frustrating dealing with politicians. And it's rare that you find one that knows how to work and help us. That's why it always comes back to the regulations of the electricity company and finding ways to work with them and not get too angry and upset as they seem to constantly put little barriers in the way.
Great, thank you, Dick. Murray appropriately put in a note here that credit unions are financial cooperatives. I think that needs to be clear, and Connexus is a credit union, of course, and I think it's good to see that they're partnering with the Wascana down in Regina. That's really encouraging, and I think there's a general goodwill there from the credit union sector. So let's open it up. I think if people want to type their question in or raise their hand, maybe that's a better way. Martin, you and I can watch for the raised hands if people want to jump in with a question. We saw a lot of comments in the chat, so maybe I can, we can go from there. Is there any question that people have for our audience members? You see anything, Martin? Or I'm just scanning the multiple screens here. This is the problem. Maybe while we're waiting, Larissa, you had a point you want to jump in with. Can I ask you to unmute yourself and maybe just weigh in?
Sure. So I typed it in the chat, but so policymakers are always very concerned about what the public supports. And that's one advantage that solar energy really has. It has a very high level of social acceptability as a low carbon energy source. And I've been part of a research team that recently did a survey and found that solar was actually #1 in terms of those different low carbon energy options. And I think that looking at that energy mix too is really important. I think that's one area where those binary polarization aspects can maybe be bridged through actually looking at the entire energy mix and recognizing the importance of renewable energy in that mix.
That's great. Thank you, Larissa. I see that Evelyn Scott, I don't know what your real name is, or maybe that is it, but Scott, can you go ahead, please?
Evelyn is the real power here, but this is Harvey Scott,
okay.
An old retired teacher and farmer. We powered up our farm 10.5 kilowatts here a few years ago, and basically on principle. Our problem seems to be that the rates that the grid charge, you can't pay down a system, certainly not in my lifetime. So I just wondered how either the SPICE people in Edmonton, which are very inspirational, or anyone else, how with this the net metering and so on with the grids. Again, we have a monopoly here. 4 or 5 companies own the grids, and from our point of view, it's virtually impossible to pay your own way, and that's the need for cooperatives. I think we lost our co-op here, which we had back from the 60s, 50s, and 60s, and when the old people decided to sell it off to the power companies, then that was the end of really any possibility of ever breaking even. But anyway, that's my biased view. Any thoughts from any of you on problems with cost of distribution and transmission? That is the people that own the grids.
Yeah, so I mean, I can answer a bit of that for the group. So because there's people from all over the country, just give a little background. So Mark Andre asked about what's my co-op story, and this is my co-op story to policymakers. So in Alberta, after the Second World War, when they were starting to implement a grid, we don't have a monopoly utility in Alberta. There's regional monopolies. and it's an investor-driven market. So nobody would build a grid for the rural areas, for the farmers and such. And so they form co-ops. And most of the rural customers in Alberta are serviced. They get electricity delivered to them through what are known as rural electrification associations, and these are co-ops. They were member-owned co-ops, very successful. As Evelyn Scott, I don't know, actually, I don't think that's his name, but his wife's name, but anyway, has pointed out, a lot of these now, so they were so successful, they got stabilized, they paid off their systems and everything. They required further investments, and so a lot of the multinational companies are buying up their assets, okay, and taking away the value of them when they were a co-op to now a for-profit company. But that was my story to policymakers, is that nobody would touch that. And so co-op stepped in and performed that service. And it's kind of like that with renewable energy generation as well, especially 5 or 6 years ago. Nobody would touch that in Alberta. And so this was the role for the co-ops. Let us come in, use our own money, let us see what we can do, okay? And once you kind of start the ball rolling, then the for-profit companies will want a piece of it, right? The challenge that we have in Alberta is, Dick mentioned it a little bit too, I don't question the fact that we really need a stable pricing environment, and this is not what you have in Alberta. It's a very highly unpredictable market, and this is the #1 challenge that we have in Alberta here, without question. I think Jeff Roberts from Bow Valley also mentioned in the chat, nobody would run a business where it costs you more to deliver a product than the product is worth. Nobody would shop online if Amazon charged you $100 for a $10 item. But that is the fact of reality in Alberta. It's not quite that bad a ratio, but you pay more for the electricity to be delivered than the electricity is worth, okay? And the reason for this is the delivery is regulated. And the regulated environment is, as Dick's point, if somebody wants to build a transmission line, they go to the Utilities Commission and say, okay, it's going to cost this much and I need this much for my investors. And therefore, if you amortize it over 30 years, you got to guarantee me that price or I'm not going to build it. And they do that because they know that you won't have a grid if you don't guarantee it. And so the grid in Alberta is regulated. And so
I hate to jump. I think it's important to kind of note there, and I don't mean to be a devil's advocate so much, but Alberta being an open power market, the price efficiency of the raw cost of power is quite honed in, and they've created quite an interesting kind of entity there where you do get quite significantly cheap power in the province. So it makes it very difficult for a solar array that's located at the load or at your source to compete to those bottom dollar entities that are predominantly coal. Alberta has an amazing coal resource, some of the best coal in the world, especially in comparison to Saskatchewan, and a lot of gas. And because it's that open market, the power price does generally get forced down quite low. But I just want to put that in there. I don't mean to be like counter arguing or anything like that, but it definitely makes the transmission and distribution charges stand out quite far and above the actual raw cost of the power.
But I will interject for a moment. The utilities have a vested interest to keep building the same and stringing it out further and further. And when the renewables were brought into Ontario, the first big problem they had was they put there were 5,000 farmers in rural southwestern Ontario who put 10 kilowatt systems up because it only cost $70,000, which is a couple of tires on a tractor. They put that up. They knew that was a little pension for the next 20 years. They couldn't get the power onto the grid because the grid in Ontario at the time was so bad because what they had been doing for the previous 25, 30 years was just stringing the lines out further and further and longer. The grid operators didn't even know what the minimum capacity needs were on the lines. They just boost the power. So I know of an installer who put a system on a farm and he couldn't get the grid to take the power.
Yeah.
The grid was pushing power down the line so hard. he called the operator and he said, just stop, call us in a week. The operator did something, never told him, but the farmer noticed that his lights weren't blowing out anymore. The operators were just pushing power. So if you have a system that's built around extending the grid continuously, it'll collapse because you're not spreading the cash around the local generation and appropriately designed grids. You're just building grids. Like a carpenter who swings a hammer will always want to swing the hammer. They don't want to change the utilities, but they will be forced to because the technology change is happening too fast for the regulation. So you may have cheap power now and an expensive grid. At some point that will implode. There's an avoided cost benefit of renewables, and the utilities don't want to talk about that. They just want new big centralized power plants.
Martin?
Anyway, I'll be quiet.
Martin?
Yes.
It's Harvey, the original answer or question answer. And I want to thank you all for your really good answers. And obviously it's a big topic, but believe me, having originally had a rural electrification co-op here, going back to the co-ops is the answer. And that's why I really appreciate this whole webinar today. And we have in Alberta, for example, the Alberta Cooperative Energy, which provides a pretty good way to retail my micro generating stuff. So we're headed in that direction. What's happening in Edmonton with Spice is wonderful, and what I hear happening across the country, and that's the way we got to go. We've got to go to the cooperative model. It may not be in my lifetime out here, but it's going to happen.
Thanks a lot for that response. We're unfortunately now all the questions flood in, and this is how this happens. We could probably talk all day about this, and I would absolutely love it. We're going to try to do a few things right now. I'm going to ask Stan to release a sort of a post-panel survey, and while he does that, I know Josh wants to jump in with some comments, and then Jeff has a question. I'm going to ask both Josh and Jeff to be super concise because we have about 4 minutes left. So to Josh, and Stan will release a question.
Yeah, thanks. I'm with Wascana Solar Co-op as well. I just wanted to say, on the whole question of regulation, I know I'm a high school teacher here in Regina, and they were very interested in going solar at our school, but then the utility has a certain threshold where you reach a certain amount of kilowatts. I think it was 17,000 is the sweet spot per month. Then your cost of kilowatt power goes down. And I've always wondered policy wise, why do they offer these incentives? Maybe if they didn't, it would help more organizations to look at renewable energy. That's a comment I had. I also just wanted to say quickly, our cooperative, I don't know how much people talked about the history, but it just, it started in a bar, and we met in community rinks and curling rinks, and it just was people who wanted to make a difference. There was people who had economic business incentivization. There was people who wanted environmental change, and we have come together as a group, and it's been a very positive experience. The change in net metering was difficult, but I think still with our programs, we're able to offer, we still have people interested in both of our programs. So just to the last point, the co-op experience has been great for us, if anything, just at that community level. And we're still robust despite the net metering change, because we've spread out our cost amongst many different people. When times are tough, we survive, and when times get better, we're still there. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thanks a lot, Josh. And I promised Jeff I'd get to his question, so that's why I'm zooming through here. Quick question, and we'll ask our panelists for a quick answer, and hopefully we end on time.
Yeah, the idea of a grid not being able to accept energy in Saskatoon with the net metering program here, we can't put systems downtown because the grid is such a mess that it'll fry up everybody's operations down there. But what my question was, those that have been providing dividends, have you found that there's a tax regime that's different from standard corporate structure for cooperatives with respect to paying dividends? There's some evidence that until such time as all of an investor's capital has been repaid, any dividend shouldn't be taxable.
I can answer that question. We operate as a small business, so we get the small business benefits. So we pay a dividend. The dividend goes to we pay a dividend based on our profit. And until we get to a certain size, we're taxed as a small business, and then the investor gets taxed on their dividend. The dividend is paid out of profits from us. And then they get taxed.
So any dividend payable to a shareholder is taxed just like any other dividend from a Canadian corporation.
Well, it's a dividend from a small business Canadian corporation. I'm not a tax person, so I really shouldn't be answering the question. I don't know the subtleties.
I don't think there's too many co-op tax people in this country.
Yeah, I think in our particular instance, and Jeff, is that the patronage dividend is not taxable in the hands of the member if it is considered a consumable good. And so we would have to look at the nuances at CRA regarding this. It would be like any federated cooperative in Saskatchewan where they pay out dividends. If it's not deducted off your income tax in any way, shape, or form, then you can ignore it.
The other thing I think is that some of these shares are typically RSP eligible, right, Dick? I have some OREC shares, for example, in RSP. So
they are RSP eligible, but we're not a normal co-op. Sorry, OREC is not a normal co-op. We cannot pay patronage because we cannot do business with our members. Co-energy can and will pay patronage, but so our situation is a little different, and it's caused us some difficulties with regulatories, but it's not a big issue.
SES Solar Co-operative can pay dividends. Trouble is for us, we needed to build up a reserve, and we keep spending all the members' money so fast in new installations. You know, we got to quit that. Give myself a slap.
There's an age-old problem there, Rod.
Rod, you do it with new equity investment.
There you go.
New infusion of equity, so you're not burning the old equity.
Yeah, well, just send the check. Just send the check, Dick. We're looking forward to it.
I'm not Saskatchewan.
That's true.
So this has been great. We had this problem when we were organizing the panel. We had to shut the conversation down forcefully at one point. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. Stan's going to show the results from our second survey question, just to see if we moved the dial a little bit. You may remember on the first question, increase somewhat. Yay, stayed the same, 20. That's all right. Increased significantly. So we had some progress here in terms of increasing basic understanding of renewable energy co-ops. I think there's an opportunity for more. What strikes me here is the rich policy discussion that is invariably part of this conversation. And I think we have an opportunity to kind of do some research around that. I know Dick's been pushing this for a long time. And I think we have some opportunities to do that. And we are going to pursue that at the center and the JSGS. So thank you everyone so much for your participation. Stan, you had a couple slides I wanted to just shoot quickly by. If you can pull up the deck, please, at the very end. So two things I want to flag is we have a certificate program, the Social Economy Cooperatives. If anyone's interested, I strongly encourage you to sign up for that. It's on our website. And next slide, please, Stan. The other thing is for our co-op members, we have a survey ongoing now about governance. I'd encourage you to complete that survey. Stan will make that available through a link. And we also will be sharing this deck and the recording after later in this week. So again, thank you, everyone. Look forward to being in touch again, and have a good rest of your day.